Inside the shaking metal barrel, what terrifying creature could be held within, requiring the combined strength of two grown men? Just to lift it onto a table? The sheriff cautiously opens the lid and asks the old man what it is. The old man is shocked to see it and quickly asks them where they got it. The man, still shaken, says, "They just caught it in the town's lake. A price that cost them 2 lives." The old man then pours the barrel's contents into a tank. A strange, lively fish appears right before their eyes. It has sharp, vicious teeth and is extremely aggressive. It's clearly no ordinary fish. The old man just tentatively dips his finger into the water and almost loses it. What's more terrifying is that there isn't just one of these strange fish. There are at least tens of thousands in the lake. Hearing this, the old man panics. He quickly grabs a fossil from inside and places it next to the tank for comparison. Unbelievably, the strange fish is an exact match to the image on the fossil. The old man finally confirms that this is the prehistoric piranha from 2 million years ago, a species that once dominated the waters. The ancestor of all piranhas. They always hunt in packs and are extremely sensitive to the smell of blood. The moment prey is injured, the entire school will swarm to attack. But what puzzles him is that this species was supposed to be long extinct. Why would it suddenly reappear? It turns out that just a few days ago, a small earthquake shook the town, causing a fissure to open on the lake bed. It accidentally released the prehistoric piranhas that had been trapped in an underground lake since a volcanic eruption. A massive whirlpool immediately formed in the middle of the lake, and an unlucky fisherman was pulled in. The starving school of piranhas was ravenous. They devoured the fisherman in an instant. Afterwards, police received a missing person report and immediately went to the lake to investigate. They found the fisherman's boat, and the sheriff tried to pull it in. But the wooden pier suddenly collapsed, and the sheriff fell into the water as she struggled to swim back to shore. The next thing she knew, a mangled corpse surfaced. It was the fisherman who had been devoured by the piranhas. They worked together to drag the body ashore, wondering what kind of creature could have done this. To find out the cause, the next day, the sheriff took 3 officers out on a speedboat to the middle of the lake to investigate. Using their equipment, they scanned the massive fissure caused by the earthquake. 2 officers immediately put on their dive gear and dove into the water to investigate. Soon, they entered the fissure and discovered a huge underwater cavern. For safety, 1 officer remained at the entrance, while the other ventured inside. The sight inside astonished him. Pillar-like structures were covered in glowing egg sacs. Not knowing what they were, the officer reached out to touch them. But suddenly, the light was too dim, and the officer couldn't see what had just moved. In a panic, he lit a flare, revealing an absolutely terrifying scene. It wasn't until he saw his partner's safety line suddenly snap that the officer at the entrance sensed something was wrong. He quickly swam in to check the situation, only to see his partner being attacked by a school of strange fish. The surrounding water was instantly stained red with blood. Terrified, the officer turned to flee for his life, but a huge swarm of piranhas chased after him and began frantically devouring his legs. Realizing the 2 were in danger, Charles quickly jumped in to save them. Unfortunately, it was too late. When the officer was pulled onto the boat, his lower body had been stripped to the bone. A live, thrashing piranha was brought into the boat with him to identify the strange fish and its origin. The sheriff took the piranha, which had cost 2 lives to obtain, to the old man, who was a biologist. From him, she learned of the piranha's terrifying nature. The old man explained that the reason they could survive until now was likely because, in an environment with extremely scarce food, they resorted to cannibalism. The dark environment, while causing their eyesight to severely degenerate, had given their hearing and sense of smell an epic upgrade. Their temperament also became more bloodthirsty and brutal. It's hard to imagine such a large number of them appearing in a modern-day lake, and the terrible disaster it would cause. Hearing this, the sheriff knew the situation was dire, because today, the town was holding its annual water festival. She immediately led her team to the scene and saw that countless tourists had already gathered. The officers began to evacuate the area, shouting that the party was over and to get out of the water, but the noise was too loud, and no one could hear their warning. With no other choice, the officer fired a warning shot.
What the fuck?
This is the Lake Victoria Sheriff's Department. The sheriff has declared an emergency. However, they didn't expect that their well-intentioned warning would backfire. It made the tourists even more frantic. They ignored the warnings and jumped into the water, even turning the music up to its loudest, continuing their death-defying party. The sheriff, holding a megaphone, tried her best to persuade them, but the huge commotion had already attracted the piranhas. An unlucky woman was the first to be attacked. Then, more piranhas swarmed in, launching a frenzied attack on the people in the water. Only then did people realize something was wrong. Desperately trying to swim back to shore, the party scene instantly turned to chaos. In a flash, the lake was stained red with blood. Piercing screams filled the air. The fast swimmers might save their own lives, but the slower ones could only become food. Once targeted by the piranhas, it only takes a few seconds to be turned into a skeleton. Faced with this situation, the officers were helpless. They could only do their best to rescue people. But just then, the stage buckled under the weight and tilted, falling straight into the water. In the heat of the moment, Charles jumped onto a jet ski and started shooting the piranhas with a shotgun. He also managed to save quite a few tourists. The other officer was incredibly brave. To cover the tourists' escape to the shore, he ripped off a boat's propeller and plunged it into the water, spinning it wildly. He killed a large number of piranhas in an instant. But against the endless swarm, even he couldn't hold on. He was quickly overwhelmed. When everything quieted down, the party scene was horrifying. The tourists were dead or injured, and severed limbs were everywhere. The sheriff was tending to the wounded when she suddenly got a call from her son, Jack. He said they were also under attack by the piranhas. Learning that her 3 children were in danger, the sheriff was instantly terrified and rushed over with Charles. It turned out that just moments ago, Jack, with his younger brother and sister, were out on the lake with a friend on a yacht. They accidentally hit an underwater rock. Due to the massive inertia, a man and a woman were thrown into the water. A school of piranhas immediately surrounded them. In an instant, the woman was devoured completely. A piranha even shot out of her mouth. The terrified man quickly surfaced and desperately swam towards the yacht. The woman on the boat grabbed a paddle to help, but the man was attacked by the piranhas. Although the woman managed to pull him up, his entire lower body was a bloody mess. He soon died from blood loss. What was worse, someone was trapped in the cabin. As the water level rose, a large number of piranhas swam into the cabin. The girl could only stand on a high point and shout for help from Jack outside. But a piranha leaped out of the water, trying to attack her. Jack tried to open the sunroof to save her, but found that it was stuck. With no other choice, he called his sheriff mother for help. Upon receiving the call, the sheriff immediately rushed over with Charles. Worried about hitting a rock, she could only stop the boat a short distance away and threw a rope across. After Jack tied the other end, she climbed along the rope onto the yacht. Learning that someone else was trapped in the cabin, the sheriff started to think of a way to save her. But she couldn't open the stuck sunroof either. The only other way in was completely submerged, and it was full of ferocious piranhas. With no other choice, the sheriff first had to get the woman and 2 children to the safety of her boat, and then figure out how to rescue the girl. The water below was teeming with piranhas. One slip, and they would be torn to shreds. But they made a fatal mistake. They shouldn't have had 4 people cross at the same time. Sure enough, when they were halfway across, the rope was already sagging very close to the water. The woman in front, because of her long hair, was immediately attacked by the piranhas. In a panic, the woman struggled frantically, but the piranhas leaped up and tore at her back. The woman quickly ran out of strength and fell directly into the water, where she was brutally devoured by the piranhas. Seeing this terrifying scene, the others hurriedly scrambled across. The 2 children made it safely to the boat. But just then, the handrail suddenly broke off. Damn it. Thankfully, Charles had quick reflexes. He hit the gas and narrowly avoided disaster. The sheriff also took the opportunity to get back on the boat safely. However, the girl's situation was not looking good. The water was already up to her feet, and the piranhas were starting to stir. The girl could only fight back with a frying pan. Seeing his future girlfriend in mortal danger, Jack didn't listen to his mother and get to safety. Instead, he untied a rope and secured it around himself. He thought of a way to rescue the girl, which was to use their companion's body to lure away the piranhas. When Jack threw the body into the water, the piranhas in the cabin were immediately drawn out. While the piranhas were feeding, Jack quietly jumped into the water from the side, and then quickly dove under the boat and into the cabin. After successfully reaching the girl, Jack quickly contacted his mother on the walkie-talkie, telling them to get ready to pull them out with the boat. After that, Jack found a flare, and then dove back into the water. He opened 2 gas canisters, planning to blow up the piranhas after they escaped. Once everything was ready, Jack called his mother, telling them to speed away after 10 seconds. The 2 of them then dove into the water, unaware that something had gone wrong outside. Of all times, the speedboat just wouldn't start, and Jack, not knowing this, had already lit the flare and thrown it into the cabin. What was worse, the piranhas had finished eating their companion's body and were heading back. Seeing this, Jack could only hold the girl and brace for the worst. Just in the nick of time, the speedboat finally started. Charles floored the gas pedal. The massive explosion killed a large number of piranhas. Jack and the girl were also successfully rescued. But just as they were celebrating their survival, the sheriff suddenly received a call from the old man. "Julie, this is Carl. We have a major problem. I'm looking out at a school of dead piranha. It's not all of them, but I think we've got a good start. You don't understand. The specimen you left with me, it has no mature reproductive organs. In other words, the piranhas that attacked them, the ones that could devour an adult in an instant, We're just a school of immature juveniles. Hearing this, Charles asked with a puzzled look, so, where are the parents?